If you guys follow the channel, you will know that with the PS5 in this generation, I've been very, very pleased with the amount of games we've got. Yes, we may have not got a lot of Sony exclusive. We still have some like Spider-Man 2, Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok. But there's no doubt that this generation has been hindered by the approach that Sony took. With all the closures we've got with Bluepoint Games, with all the cancellations with online games, with Ben Studio, Bluepoint Games obviously shutting down. There's one PlayStation studio that for years used to be one of the best studios, and that is Naughty Dog. And there's been some new news come out regarding that Last of Us online game was 80% complete before they decided to pull the plug, which is absolutely nuts when you think of the amount of money that was wasted. So if you do enjoy these videos, make sure you hit the like button. And let's go. The Last of Us multiplayer was 80% complete before cancellation. Spent 7 years in development. 7 years in development. That is absolutely nuts. And we're going to look at a video from one of the directors, I believe, who basically explained why it was cancelled, or why during the time of COVID or during the time of lockdown, this is where the industry decided to throw money at games because everyone's at home. Everyone was playing a lot of online games to increase being sociable, because that was really the only way you could be sociable whilst everyone was off work and playing games. But this was not a great strategy because this didn't reflect real life. We never thought that something like this would happen. But it's crazy how they tried to capitalize on this and thought we need to put millions into this because now gaming is booming. So The Last of Us was around 80% complete, having been in development for roughly 7 years before its cancellations, which tells you why we've got basically no new games from Naughty Dog so far this generation. Speaking on the Lance E. Lee podcast, Vinit Agarwal recounted his time at Naughty Dog, The Last of Us multiplayer, and its cancellation. As a game director, he said he worked on the project for nearly 7 years. My gosh, what a waste of time. And at the time of its cancellation, he explained that in the interview that the game was 80% complete. It was very, very close to done. Agarwal set the scenes for the project, explaining Sony invested in the project during the COVID-19 pandemic. During COVID, the games industry saw a huge growth because everyone was at home. So in 2020, money was flooding into the gaming industry because people were playing a lot more games because they were at home. What else can they do? Then he does go on to say, Sony decided to put a lot more money into online gaming like everyone else. That's part of why The Last of Us multiplayer got funding. We got off the ground and we made a lot of progress. And the game was doing really well internally. God, this is even more upsetting when you think about it, because this most probably would have been a fun game. But then again, Naughty Dog were going to stop being a single player driven studio and would have just focused on making updates, making DLC, making content for this online game. But then he says The Last of Us multiplayer was one of the casualties of the money well drying up. Basically, at one point, a decision had to be made. Make this game or make the game that Neil Druckmann was directing. Naughty Dog had to choose the project that was the bread and butter of the studio, Intergalactic, rather than the experimental game that he believed was going to be really big. That was a devastating moment for me. He found out the project's cancellation 24 hours before it was revealed publicly. And now, obviously, as you know, we are getting Intergalactic, which I don't know how well this game's gonna do. And just like this comment says here, the thing that sucks, couldn't it not just have been a newer version of Factions? Why did they have to go full Naughty Dog and make the greatest thing ever known to mankind? Which is very true, because we heard at the time Neil Druckmann was saying this is the biggest, most ambitious project to date. But it just makes you think, doesn't it? You spend millions of pounds, 7 years in development to make this game. It's a shame because people were actually excited for this one. Everyone who played the original Last of Us Factions, they really enjoyed it. I didn't actually play much of that. I think I played it once or two. I didn't really play much, but a lot of people were looking forward to something like an online game with The Last of Us again, especially, you know, on current gen consoles. But it's such a shame, instead of becoming a live service studio, couldn't have you just made something, an online game for people to play that you then didn't have to support for the next 5-10 years to try and keep it alive, relying on a player base to probably buy microtransactions.
So I got to direct my own game. I was working on The Last of Us multiplayer, so like a standalone Last of Us multiplayer game. And I've worked on that game for nearly 7 years.
7 years
So I've worked on
of
it
your life.
From 2017 to 2016 roughly to 2023. Unfortunately, the game got canceled. So what happened was during COVID, the game industry saw a huge growth because everyone was at home. So in 2020, money was flooding into the game industry because people are playing a lot more games all of a sudden because they're at home. What else do they have to do?
They had an excuse. They were told you can't do anything else.
Not just that, online games specifically saw a huge boost because people wanted to play with their friends. They couldn't see their friends, so they had to play online with their friends. So online games got a huge boon. So Sony, along with all the other, Sony is the owner of Naughty Dog. So Naughty Dog is a first-party company of Sony. Mm-hmm. So Sony decided to put a lot of money into online gaming, like everyone else was. And so that's part of why The Last of Us multiplayer got funding, and we got off the ground, and we made a lot of progress. And the game was doing really, really well internally. We developed it almost 80%
it's such a shame to hear.
It was very, very close to done. But then all the forces that pushed the game industry in 2020 were the reasons it started declining in 2022, 2023. So as people returned to the office, suddenly people didn't have as much time to play games. You know, that spending reduced. The economy also went down. And so all that money that flooded into the game industry was not going to be able to sustain because money was getting pulled out. They had to also kind of collapse the spending they'd spent. Like they overspent basically. Mm-hmm. They were overzealous. Mm-hmm. And so one of the casualties of that was this game I was directing. Basically, at one point, a decision had to be made. Okay, make this game or make the next game that Neil Druckmann was directing, the president of the company. And so kind of naturally, you can understand what happened there. Mm-hmm. They had to pick the game that was kind of the sole bread and butter of the studio, rather than this experimental game that I was working on that I believe was going to be really big, but unfortunately couldn't see the light of day. And that was a devastating moment for me, because I spent 7 years working on that game, and it was soul crushing. I remember honestly finding out that I was the director of the game, and to find out that I was getting canceled 24 hours before it was announced to the public. That's how I found out about the game getting canceled. And it was just unfortunate. And they have to do that because they have to control the messaging. And
did that hurt you more than being walked out of the office with your box?
10 times more. Because
so you had so
this is
much
something
invested.
I really cared about.
Yeah, you had so much invested in 7 years of investment.
And you remember I was telling you,
investment, yeah.
You remember I was telling you that what inspired me about the games of the 90s was they came from a core inspiration of something from outside of games. I had a core inspiration for this game that drove what happened in the game.
And you know what? This is just absolutely sad when you come to think about it, because he seems like such a nice guy as well. He seems one of the, you get people hired nowadays who are like terrible and shouldn't be in the gaming industry. He sounds so passionate about game designs, about gaming, and he seems like a stand-up guy. And it's just so sad because he spent 7 years of his damn life making this game, and then it got pulled. And what gets me really annoyed is that you have all of these investors and all of these people that are supposedly, the big timers in the gaming industry. And you don't think at the time of the lockdowns and everything like that, you don't think that they thought, you know what, we best be very careful in terms of our investment. Yes, we want to capitalize on maybe people staying at home, maybe getting them into gaming. Yes, we understand that. But you're telling me they invest so much money. What if people go back to work? What if people go back to normal? Are they going to be playing as many games online? Are they going to be dedicating as much time to literally gaming when everyone got released from their homes and we were allowed to kind of be normal? I think people would rather go outdoors than stay home and play games. And don't get me wrong, during the lockdowns and the pandemic, as it's described, obviously I bought my PS5, and that definitely re-griped the passion for gaming that I had all these years ago. But it's just so confusing to think that they didn't see this coming. It's like you spend this long on online games thinking that, oh my gosh, we need to capitalize, but you just ended up wasting millions thinking that this is not going to backfire. And it just shows you the balloon budgets of all of these games that came out. Like you look at Spider-Man 2, you look at The Last of Us Part 2, all of these games, that their budgets were absolutely insane. And this is why we're getting the crash we're getting today when you come to think about it, because there are so many closures. There are so many people losing their jobs because they overspent. The game budgets of some of these games are just through the roof. They are more than flipping movies. You look at the budget of obviously Grand Theft Auto 6, it's just unbelievable when you come to think. I think that's between £1 to £2 billion is being spent on that game. And it's just sad to see that it didn't see the light today, because I feel like there was a couple of live service games that would have made sense as long as Naughty Dog could continue making single player games, because that's what they're known. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd rather they make single player games, and maybe it's a good thing that got cancelled, but I feel like the 2 online games or live service games that were in development, I feel like The Last of Us Factions was one that people were excited about 100%, and that rumored, or we saw a trailer actually for the Spider-Man multiverse live service game. For me, those were the 2 that were freaking exciting. It brings you back to the question, would Insomniac become a live service studio? If they were going to release that game at the expense of that, and we wouldn't have got games like maybe Spider-Man 2, not even Spider-Man 2, Wolverine, and other games, I would rather them cancel them than become a live service studio and then rely on a player count for the next 10 years. It's just, I find it so annoying that Fortnite are like supposedly not struggling, but they've seen a reduction in players. It's like a 10-year-old game. It's nearly a 10-year-old game, is it? So it makes you think, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing that this game got cancelled? What do you think? Would you have wanted to see this? I would, but not at the expense of they become a live service studio. The 7 years making this game, then it gets cancelled. You can understand why we haven't seen Naughty Dog this generation, apart from remasters and remakes, which is freaking nuts. So you hope Sony, you hope the gaming industry will start to learn. How many more closures can we get? Anyways, drop your thoughts in the comments and let me know.